So I'm recording my homily for the 28th week of Ordinary Time. And this week I'm going to be reflecting both on the first reading and the Gospel, because they both have stories that tie in very closely together. But before I get to those two, so the other day I was having dinner with one of our parishioners in their family in their home, and doing a little house blessing for them. And we had dinner, and we were talking afterwards, and the dad asked me who my favorite saint was. And that's really hard for me because I've always loved the saints, and I'll read anything on the saints, and I love them all. But there's two in particular that have always had a strong impact on my life. I consider them friends, very much so. And their lives are connected in some way. And so the first is St. Francis of Assisi. Now, a lot of people who say they like St. Francis of Assisi, it's often connected to animals and to nature, and there was a love there that Francis had for all of creation, everything God had created. But his holiness was so much deeper than that, and he would be the first to say so. And so there's a couple stories about his conversion. So he grew up in a very wealthy home. His father was a very successful businessman and had done well. And so Francis just had the fruit of all of that. And Francis' personality, he was the type of person who just loved life. He loved life. He loved spending. He loved being generous. Those were things that were always part of his life, even before he became whom we know him as Brother Francis. Now, part of that is his friendships. He was very outgoing, full of life, loved life. And so all the people loved to be around him, his friends. And so they would throw parties constantly. That was just who he was, right? As God began to work in his heart, he started to become more and more serious, more and more focused, I guess I should say. That's probably better than just saying serious. He was more focused. And there's a story about him one night when he had come back to Assisi because he had had a vision of God. God had spoken to him, and he wasn't quite sure the meaning of it. And so what God had said to him was, Francis, there is going to come a day when you are going to despise what you love and love what you despise. Now, Francis didn't know what that meant, but he took it in. And so this one particular night, he's reflecting on this, and he had just thrown a party for his friends, but in some way he kind of knew it was a last party. That his life was changing. And so as he's walking home, he's just having this overwhelming sense that everything really and truly is changing. And so as his friends are all drunk and lying around and they've had their party, he's not into that anymore. His heart has really changed. A little while later, Francis was on his way outside of Assisi. He was on a path, and he came across a leper, and so the leper was crossing his path. Now, there was a leper colony there. Leprosy was unfortunately a reality in Western Europe during the time, and there was no cure. And so they would form these leper colonies, and there was one right outside Assisi. So Francis is traveling. He crosses paths with this leper. Now, normally, there was almost a standard protocol when this would happen, because the leper would have a bell on them. The leper would warn people and say, you got to stay away from me, right? You can't come near me. And so that started to happen. But Francis was changing. And he heard the words of Jesus that he had heard a few nights before. And the words that said, you will come to love that which you despise. And he realized his whole life, like everybody else, he had despised the leper. And so he got off his horse, he walked up to the leper, he gave him a donation, right? Gave him some money. But then he kissed his hands. And that was a big no-no. You don't do that for a leper. But he kissed his hands. And then he would even come to know this man. He would go and have dinner with him in his home. He would share food. Those were all things you did not do with a leper. But Francis' heart was changing. You could call this a conversion. And it was because of the leper. The leper was an instrument of God to help that change. And so he was beginning to love that which he originally had despised. Now, in part of Francis' life, there was going to come a point where he was going to hear God's voice again. And God's voice was going to say to him through what we now call the San Damiano cross, right? This was a cross, much like this one, but stylized differently. It was Byzantine in character, Byzantine in his style. And this cross was going to speak to Francis. And so Jesus would say to him, Francis, my church is falling down. Rebuild it. Or to some words thereof. And so Francis, again, not completely understanding, eventually began to rebuild this little chapel, San Damiano Chapel, named after Saint Damien. And so he rebuilds the chapel. But this was to lead to his full mission in life, to help rebuild the Catholic Church. You know, the Catholic Church back then was in very similar state that it is today. It was falling down spiritually, right? The faith of the people was becoming very lukewarm. In fact, the faith of the people was becoming leprous. It was dying from the inside. Right? That's what leprosy does. The body dies from the inside. And so Francis was called to be a doctor, to be a cure to that. And he did a fantastic job. Now, the second saint, whom I truly love, is Saint Damien. Now, I love the connection with Francis on that the chapel he built was the one dedicated to Saint Damien. But the Saint Damien that I've come to really, really feel a connection to is Saint Damien of Molokai. And so this is in the United States, right? And so if you were to go back a number of years, this is still before there was a cure for leprosy. In Hawaii, their solution was when they found a person who had leprosy, they would remove them from the family immediately. I mean, it was really cold-hearted. It was brutal on the family. So they would remove the person from the family, they would put them on a boat, and then they would send them to the island of Molokai. And on the island of Molokai, there's I don't call it a peninsula, but there's a section of the island that's completely isolated because of a mountain range. And so nobody can really cross to the rest of the island. And it's almost like this little area of the island is a prison. And so they turned that into the leper colony. So they would board them on the boat, they would send them to this isolated section of Molokai, and that's where the leper colony began. Now, there began to be rumors and stories that there were really, really bad things happening in this leper colony. The strong were manipulating and using and basically killing the weak. And so they were stealing, there was rampant alcohol abuse, there was sexual abuse of children. You have to remember these children were getting sent there without their parents. They would have nobody to fend for them. And so there was all kinds of really, really bad things happening. So the Bishop of Hawaii calls together all of his priests one day and he says, we need a shepherd, we need a priest to go out to this community, to the leper colony, and just give them Jesus. Just give them some hope, right? Just give them something that will help them. And so Father Damien was the first to volunteer. So when he volunteered, the bishop says, now remember, I'm only sending you for 2 months, right? Because I don't want you to get leprosy. Because if you have too much contact with them, you may contract it. And so he warned him several times, don't touch them, don't get near them. You know, you're there to give them the sacraments. So Father Damien goes out there. Very quickly he realizes that the situation is actually much worse than what he was told. And there's a moment, now I'm going to reference a movie. There's a movie about St. Damien. I believe it's just called Molokai, but it's about St. Damien. You could probably get it on Netflix or get it on Amazon Prime. Really, really good movie. And so in this movie, and the movie stays very close to the story. It's surprisingly close to the story. And I think it's a wonderful movie. So anyways, there's a part in the movie when Father Damien first gets to the island. And somebody tells him that they're abusing kids in this one house. And this house, they're all drunk, and it's just a horrible situation. And they say they're abusing kids in this house. So Father Damien goes in to rescue some of the kids who are in there. And so he goes in. It's a very dramatic scene. Well, anyways, the adults know that this priest doesn't want to get anywhere near him, right? So they pick up one of the men there. His name is Jimmy. So they pick up Jimmy. Jimmy has leprosy really bad. He's lost his hands. There's just stumps there. He's lost his feet. He can't walk anymore. But his face is just caved in from leprosy. It's horrible. It's repulsive. And so they pick up Jimmy, and they take Jimmy, and they literally just push him into Father Damien, because they know if they do that, Father Damien's just going to run screaming out of there, right? He's just going to be terrified of that. And then they figure they can get back to what they were doing. Their parties, right? So they throw Jimmy into Father Damien, and Father Damien does not react the way they thought he would. But rather he embraces, he gives Jimmy just this great big hug. And then he whispers to him, and he says, "Jimmy, I don't know your pain in your heart, but I do know that Jesus loves you, that God loves you with all his heart. And even though not everything changed in that moment, you get the feeling that that was the turning point. It was the turning point in that community. And everyone there who heard it knew that this priest, whom they would come to know as Father Damien, was going to change things. That he was bringing with him Jesus. And he was bringing with him hope, because they were absolutely hopeless. But what was also changing was Father Damien, because he knew he couldn't leave in 2 months. That these people were going to be his family. And he was going to be a father to them. You know, as priests, we're called father. And I'm not sure we always really appreciate what that means on our part. That we need to be a father. We need to be a dad, a spiritual dad. And so he came to realize that he was never going to leave that island. And he became a spiritual dad, a spiritual father to them. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. In the first reading today, we have the story of Naaman. Naaman is a military captain, a military leader. And he's a leader of a military that is not part of the Jewish people. He's not part of the Israelites. He's a foreigner. But he has lots of provisions. He has lots of money. He has lots of power. Well, he comes down with leprosy. And no amount of money or power will cure him. And so he basically goes searching around anywhere, looking for somebody who can cure him. So he comes across the Israelites, and somebody tells him, go to Elisha. Go to Elisha. Elisha is one of the prophets. Remember, Elisha was a student of Elijah. And so Elisha is very much considered a man of God, probably one of the most holy men during his time. And so people say, go to Elisha, maybe he can heal you. So Naaman goes to Elisha, and he asks Elisha if he can cure him. Now, at first Elisha is like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm a prophet, I'm not this miracle healer. But he gives a little bit of thought, and so finally he tells Naaman, he says, go down to the Jordan River and wash in it. Now, to any Christian, you have to be excited about this, because years later, Jesus was going to be down in the Jordan River, in the same river, washing, setting an example for all of us about how to be clean, about how to be washed and to be purified and healed, right? Spiritually healed. So Naaman looks at the river, and it's just a mud hole, right? It's the Jordan River is an ugly river. Don't get any romantic ideas that it's a beautiful river. It is ugly. It's muddy, and there's not much to it. And so Naaman looks at the river and he says, you know what? No, I'm not going to wash in the river. We've got beautiful rivers back home. This is just a mud hole. I'm not going to do it. So his servants start talking to him. Now, if you're not recognizing the story, it's because I'm referencing part of the story before our reading that we had today, okay? So his servants plead with Naaman, and they say, look, Naaman, you need to change here. You need to become more humble, and you need to obey. This is a man of God. You need to listen to him. What great advice, right? That's like spiritual direction. What great advice. And so he says, all right, fine. So he goes down into this muddy river and he washes just like Elisha told him to. And he comes out clean. He's been cured of his leprosy. It's a beautiful story of healing. Now we go into our gospel today and you have these 10 lepers. Not all of them are Israelites, right? And so Jesus is going to heal these 10 lepers. But I love the phrase that they use before they've been healed. And so this is where we're going with this. This is the powerful part for all of us. They say to Jesus as he's passing by, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Have compassion on us. Heal us. Help us. Right? You can imagine the despair of somebody who has an illness where they can't be healed. Or they think they can't be healed. And so they plead with Jesus to heal him. Jesus, Master, help us. Now here's the reality. We are all lepers. But maybe not in the way you think. You might be thinking, okay, Father Peter is going to go down the path of saying we're all sinners, which is true. We're all sinners, therefore we're lepers. Now, leprosy is different. Okay? There's a difference here that I want to draw out. Sin, in some ways, many of our sins, it's just stuff on the surface. It's symptoms of something deeper. And until that thing that's deeper is healed, we're going to keep having the sins on the surface. And so we have to go deeper and get at the root cause of what's causing our brokenness. So, I want to talk about it really quickly in 4 ways. Now, anybody who's been through formation in the Catholic Church is going to recognize this. We call them the 4 pillars of formation. And so I'm going to go through this. Now, if you're going to have trouble remembering this, just remember the word ship. S-H-I-P, right? Ship, like a boat. So each of us is like a ship in the sea of life, right? Okay, so ship. The S stands for our spiritual life. Our spiritual life is our relationship with God. Now, a while back, I remember watching a video, and a gentleman on the video said, if you really think about us as Catholics, the Catholic who is in love with God would spend at least 10% of their day giving it directly to God. In other words, 10% of our day should be spent in prayer. So 10% is approximately 2.5 hours. But I want you to think about it. Can you spend 2 hours a day in prayer? Now, I think your average mom and dad would say, that is really, really tough. Because, think about the morning. The morning you're rushing to get the kids ready for school, and you're getting ready to go to work. And so you get everything. Where is there time to pray? 2 hours? You got to be kidding. An hour? Even half an hour in the morning. Where's the time? So you go to work, you've got your whole block of day, 8, 9, 10 hours, you got to conclude the commute and all that. You get home, you've got the kids, you're getting dinner ready, you're getting their homework done, a little bit of time to relax, and then boom, you go to bed. Where is there 2 hours? To a person in love, believe it or not, there are 2 hours. There are even 2.5 hours in there. You might have to be creative, but it's there. To the person who desires it, it is there. And so, to the person who does not desire it, to the person who says, I don't even want to spend 2 hours in prayer a day. Now, if you were to ask a Catholic and say, well, no, I would like to, right? I would like to. But the reality is, I think most of us, if we're honest, would say, I'm not sure I even really desire it. That is the leprosy. The fact that we don't even desire it, right? If we don't desire it, it will never happen. It will never even be on our radar. We will never even care. And the priest can get up there and preach every single weekend about how important it is. But until the heart changes, until I can say from the very depths of my heart, Jesus, Master, help me, because I don't even desire it. Until I can say that, it'll never happen. Now think about your day again. How many hours do you have in the day? 24. I don't care how poor you are or how wealthy you are. God gives you every single day 24 hours. It's kind of nice how we're all equal that way. 24 hours. Is it possible to have 2 hours in that day where you spend it with God? Absolutely. No doubt there is time to do that. Think about your morning. Maybe you need to get up just a little bit earlier so you can have a little bit of quiet time. Maybe it's time you take out your daily missal, or you get online and you look at the readings for that day, for the daily Mass for that day. Just look at the readings, just look at the Gospel. Read it. Talk to God about it. Reflect on it. Just spend a little bit of time meditating on it. You can do that. All right? You know you can do that. Have a little bit of prayer time with the kids before you rush off, get them rushed off to school. Just a little bit of prayer time. During your lunch hour, have a little prayer booklet in your pocket, right? Have a little prayer booklet or something that maybe has, again, the scriptures for the day, something. Even on your smartphone. Have an app. There's the app iBreviary.com or just iBreviary. It's free, and you can have the daily readings on it. Okay? Reflect, spend a few minutes. Just a few minutes, okay? If you have a physically intense job, that's actually good, because a physically intense job gives you the opportunity to free your mind while you're working, or if you have a job that's fairly repetitive, frees your mind. Send it to heaven. Let God just immerse your mind in those heavenly things. A few minutes here and there. It is possible. While you're driving, pray the rosary. Pray the rosary while you're driving. Maybe on your way to work. For every Hail Mary, offer each Hail Mary for someone different in your family. You know, and I'm sure you have extended family where you could do that. These are all just random ideas, okay? Spend some time every day reading the Bible. Prayerfully, not necessarily to study, but just to read, just to meditate on. All of these things can happen through the course of the day if you want it to. If you don't want to, then that's the leprosy. And you already have the prayer for that, right? Jesus, Master, help me. Give me the desire. Now, one last thing about the spiritual life. So when you come to Mass, are you a person who sings at Mass and prays the prayers intentionally and with full voice? Or when you come to Mass, do you participate very half-heartedly and you're just really not into it and you haven't prepared for Mass, you have not read the readings, you're not even trying to sing the songs? Ask yourself, do I desire it? If the honest answer is no, and you found the leprosy. Jesus, Master, heal me. Heal me of that lukewarm leprosy. It's disgusting. Get it out of me. I want to be on fire. I want to be able to come to Mass and fully participate and thoroughly enjoy it and love it. The second part, so we have ship, right? The S is for the spiritual life. The H is for your humanity, your human life, the virtues, the natural parts of your life. We all have weaknesses. So what are some areas? Some of us really have a weakness with generosity. Sometimes we're not very generous. Some of us, we're not very kind. We're not very friendly. These are all weaknesses. That's why I'm doing all the bad things, okay? So, we're not very patient on the freeway, right? Driving to work. The person in front of us is not our brother or our sister. The person is simply in the way, right? We're not very patient. Sometimes we're not very loving. Sometimes we're not very courageous. You know, somebody says something that we disagree with, we just slink away to have more courage. Now, where's the leprosy? Is the leprosy our weakness? Not at all. We all have weaknesses. The leprosy is not even desiring to change. Not even trying to change. Not even giving it to God. Not doing nothing. Okay? And so we want to root out the leprosy. Let's have the desire to change. What is your weakness? Is your fuse really short? Do you have a temper? Do you struggle with patience? Do you struggle with purity? Do you really struggle with purity in your life? That is becoming a very, very huge thing with the access to pornography. It's everywhere now. And so you say, what is my weakness? That's not the leprosy, but say, do I desire to change? Do I desire to grow? Jesus, Master, give me the desire to change. Give me the desire to grow, to confront these weaknesses of mine, and to use them to become strengths, right? Okay, SH, the human part of us, the virtues, okay? The vices that we have in our life. Those things that we need to work on, to have the desire to do it. SHI, the intellect. Okay, our mind is a magnificent thing. It is an incredible thing. The ability to create, the ability to dream, the ability to understand incredible mysteries, whether it's in science, here about things here on earth or in space, but also about the heaven realities. Now, someone may come up and say, you know, Father, I'm just not the smartest person. Every time I pick up a book on faith, I don't get it. It's like theology just way over my head. My brain, as I say in Spanish, my brain is a burro. My brain is a donkey, okay? I am not the smartest person in the world. I think that's why I love the saints so much. Because I can pick up a book, a story of a saint, and I get it. I can follow their example. I don't have to understand things that are just really complicated. Because that's never going to be my gift. But if I don't even have the desire to grow intellectually, if I don't even have the desire to read things about the church, about the state of affairs in our world, about the saints, about things that are going on, you know, reading the writings of different people down through the ages, reading the Bible, reading books on the Bible, if I don't even have the desire, if I have no time doing that, and I don't even want the time, then I found the leprosy. That's where it's at. Jesus, Master, give me the desire to use my mind to bring heaven down here on earth and to help it become a reality. That's what Francis did, right, in his life. He made the gospel reality. Okay. SHI, the intellect. P, the pastoral life. Your pastoral life. The pastoral life is you being a pastor. It's shepherding. It's loving others, right? It's the second great commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. And so we ask ourselves, how am I loving my neighbor? Now, we all have weaknesses. We all have areas where it's a struggle for us to love our neighbor, okay? No big deal, okay? We all have weaknesses. But the question again is, this is getting very repetitive, the question is, do I even desire to grow in love for my neighbor? Do I desire to make time for my neighbor? Do I desire, in the midst of everything going on in my life, do I desire to grow in love? Okay? And I'm not just talking about like all the virtues, like love is one of the virtues. I'm not just talking about that, but I mean at the very depths of my being, that it impacts everything. Do I desire to have God's grace reside in me on a very deep level? If I don't even desire it, then I found the leprosy. And you know the prayer, okay? You already know the prayer. Jesus, Master, help me. Help me to grow in love. Help me to manifest your love. And in just saying that, wow, St. Francis' life, powerful, right? St. Damian's life, powerful. They came to a point where they can say, Jesus, Master, help me to be a loving, truly loving person. All right, God bless.